It was a cloudy afternoon in Ohio when something unusual happened. President Donald Trump's motorcade pulled into a small-town KFC. Locals crowded around the glass windows, stunned to see the leader of the free world stepping into their fast food restaurant. Not a luxury hotel or a political rally. Trump, flanked by 2 Secret Service agents, walked to the counter with a surprising ease, almost like an everyday customer. Behind the counter, a teenage employee named Sarah fumbled nervously with the register. She had never served anyone more famous than the high school football coach. Now the President of the United States was ordering a bucket of fried chicken. As Sarah punched in the order, whispers filled the room. Some people pulled out their phones to record. Others watched in quiet disbelief. A family at the corner table nudged each other, unsure if they should say something. Trump smiled, Sarah, and moved toward the waiting area. Just then, a young man at one of the tables stood up. He wasn't a fan, nor was he there for selfies. His name was Daniel Brooks, a reporter from a small local newspaper. He had a notepad in hand, and in his eyes burned a fire most reporters carried, the need to ask the tough questions, no matter the setting. The moment was too extraordinary to waste. Daniel cleared his throat, his voice echoing louder than intended. Mr. President, if I may, why here? Why KFC of all places? The restaurant went silent. Fryers still hissed, soda machines still hummed, but every person in that KFC now leaned in. Trump paused, turned, and with that familiar mix of showmanship and seriousness, he said, "Why not here?" Daniel didn't back down. He took a step forward, voice steady. "With all due respect, sir, you could eat anywhere. You could be in a 5-star restaurant right now, but you're here in a KFC surrounded by working-class people. Why?" Everyone in the room held their breath. This wasn't a press conference. This wasn't a rally. It was a chicken shop in Ohio. And yet somehow it felt more important. Trump looked around the room slowly. His eyes landed on Sarah, still trembling at the register. He pointed because she reminds me of someone. Sarah blinked, confused. The room leaned even closer. Trump continued, "When I was younger, I watched people like her. Kids working hard for very little, just trying to help their families. And I always said, one day, if I could, I'd eat where they eat, talk to the people they serve, and remind myself where real America lives." A few heads nodded. A mother at the corner smiled faintly, but Daniel wasn't satisfied. He scribbled on his pad. "That sounds nice, sir, but forgive me. Some would say this is just for show, a photo op." A hush fell. The crowd turned, waiting for Trump's response. The president's jaw tightened. He took a deep breath and said calmly, "Sometimes a show is just a show. But sometimes a show is a reminder. And today I wanted to be reminded," the crowd murmured. Even Sarah looked at him differently. Daniel, though, had only begun. Daniel raised his voice, pressing further. "Reminded of what exactly, Mr. President? Wealth, power, politics, they often pull leaders far away from the lives of everyday people. What exactly do you think sitting here eating chicken will prove to anyone?" The crowd shifted uneasily. This wasn't the kind of question they expected in a fast food joint. Trump didn't flinch. He leaned against the counter, bucket of chicken untouched. "I'll tell you what it proves," he said. "It proves that I still know how to listen. You see, politicians go to dinners with donors, with millionaires and billionaires. But when was the last time a president sat down in a place like this with people who spend their last $10 just to give their kids a treat?" Gasps and nods spread. An older man in work overalls whispered, "He's got a point." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "So, are you saying this is about empathy or politics?" Trump gave a rare, thoughtful pause. "Maybe both, but empathy without action is just words. Politics without empathy is just power. The truth is, I came here to eat, but maybe I also came here to be questioned." The silence deepened. Then an elderly woman near the window raised her hand timidly. "Mr. President," she said softly, "my husband worked at the KFC factory plant for 32 years. He died last year. And you sitting here? It means something because nobody important ever came near us." Tears welled in her eyes. Trump walked toward her slowly and placed a hand on her shoulder. Today somebody did. The room erupted in hushed applause. Daniel felt the tide turning. He hadn't expected the people to warm to Trump so quickly. He scribbled in his notepad furiously, his journalist instincts, battling with something deeper, an unease that perhaps he was missing the bigger picture. He decided to push harder. Sir, people will say you're using their pain for attention. Do you really care about the struggles of these people? Or is this just another headline? The crowd tensed again. It was the question many secretly wondered but didn't dare ask aloud. Trump looked directly at Daniel. Headlines come and go, son, but look around. He pointed at Sarah, at the elderly woman, at the family in the corner. These faces don't. Their struggles don't. And if coming here makes even one person feel seen, then it's worth whatever you or anyone else writes about me tomorrow. The honesty in his tone caught Daniel off guard. For the first time, he lowered his notepad. From the back, a middle-aged man in a construction uniform stood. Reporter, he said firmly. You keep asking if he cares. I've worked 3 jobs just to keep my family afloat. No one in Washington has ever looked me in the eye. Today he did. That matters. Daniel felt a lump form in his throat. He was supposed to be the challenger, the skeptic. But as he looked around, he realized something unsettling. This wasn't about politics anymore. It was about presence. Sarah, the teenage cashier, had been silent the whole time, too overwhelmed to speak. But now, her voice broke through the tension. Mr. President Trump turned. Yes, sweetheart. Her hands shook as she held on to the counter. I work here because my mom is sick. She can't work and I'm saving up for college. Some nights I study in the back during my breaks. Nobody notices. People just see me as the girl at the register. The room fell quiet again. Trump walked toward her. Well, tonight, Sarah, they notice. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a pen, and signed a napkin. That's not worth much money, but it might remind you that your hard work is seen. Don't stop, okay? Don't ever stop. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks. The crowd clapped softly. Even Daniel swallowed hard. For a fleeting moment, the KFC didn't feel like a fast food joint anymore. It felt like a town hall, a gathering of hearts. Daniel closed his notepad. He was starting to realize something that unsettled him. He had come looking for flaws, for staged moments, but what he was witnessing was raw, unfiltered, and painfully human, and it was changing him. Daniel stepped outside briefly, his mind racing. He had come for a headline, but the story was shifting beneath his feet. This wasn't about fried chicken or even politics. It was about connection. As he re-entered, he overheard 2 teenagers whispering near the soda machine. He's actually different here, one said. Like he's not just a president. Like he's human. Daniel jotted that down. Human. That was the story. Back at the table, Trump had finally sat down, sharing the chicken with locals. He offered Sarah the first piece and she laughed nervously, declining. A construction worker took one, cracking a joke that made the whole room chuckle. Daniel hovered nearby, torn between reporter and participant. Finally, he blurted, Mr. President, what do you want these people to remember from this moment? Trump wiped his hands on a napkin and looked around the room. That no one is invisible. Not the cashier, not the reporter, not the grandmother in the corner. America isn't built in big towers. It's built in places like this with people like you. The silence afterward wasn't empty. It was heavy, charged, meaningful. Daniel realized the headline he had come for was gone. The one he was leaving with was far greater. Daniel, though moved, couldn't shake his duty as a journalist. He leaned forward, voice quieter this time. Mr. President, forgive me, but many people out there still feel abandoned. They feel promises are made and broken. If you could tell them one truth without politics, what would it be? The room froze again. Trump leaned back in his chair, his gaze sharp but soft. The truth that I don't have all the answers and neither does any leader. But the strength of this country never rested on a president's shoulders alone. It rests on the millions of ordinary ones, the mothers, the workers, the dreamers. You can hold me accountable, and you should, but never forget the power you already carry. The words hung heavy. Daniel lowered his notepad. He wasn't expecting vulnerability, least of all here, with greasy tables and soda cups scattered around. He scanned the crowd. A father held his daughter closer. Sarah smiled through her tears. The elderly widow dabbed her eyes with a napkin. A man whispered, "That's the most honest thing I've heard him say." For the first time, Daniel's challenge felt less like an interrogation and more like a bridge. The bucket of chicken was finally passed around. People laughed nervously at the absurdity, sharing fried chicken with the president. Trump chewed thoughtfully, then pointed his drumstick at Daniel. "Come on, reporter. You asked the questions, now share the food." The crowd chuckled, and Daniel hesitated, but he sat, taking a piece. It was greasy, salty, and strangely grounding. "See," Trump said, "when we sit at the same table, everything changes. Doesn't matter if you're a president, a reporter, or a cashier. We all eat the same chicken." The line got a laugh, but it carried a weight Daniel couldn't ignore. He scribbled quietly. Shared tables change perspectives. As they ate, the atmosphere lightened. Stories were shared. The construction worker spoke about his long shifts. Sarah told Trump about her college dream. The elderly woman reminisced about her late husband's jokes. Daniel sat silently, realizing he was no longer just reporting a story. He was living one. In the corner, a man in his 40s hadn't said a word. He wore a mechanic's jacket, grease stains on his hands. Finally, he spoke. Voice low but steady. "Mr. President, my son's in the military. He's overseas right now. Sometimes I wonder if anyone really cares about the families left behind." The room hushed. Trump's expression shifted. "What's his name?" "Michael," the man whispered. Trump stood, walking over. He placed a hand on the father's shoulder. "Michael's serving for all of us, and I want you to know I care. More than that, I pray for him and for you." The man's eyes welled with tears. He nodded, unable to speak further. The silence was thick, but it wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Daniel scribbled furiously, realizing this wasn't just a story about KFC anymore. It was about ordinary lives being recognized, if only for a night. Daniel slipped into the restroom to gather his thoughts. He splashed cold water on his face, staring at his reflection. He had entered this KFC determined to expose a staged act. But what he found was something harder to dismiss. He pulled out his recorder, replaying the words he'd captured. "No one is invisible. Shared tables change perspectives. The strength of the country rests on ordinary ones." He muttered to himself, "Is this a president speaking or just a man who remembered what matters?" Returning to the dining area, he noticed the shift. The people were no longer starstruck. They were engaged. It wasn't about selfies or bragging rights. It was about being seen. Trump caught his eye and nodded slightly, as if acknowledging Daniel's silent reflection. Daniel sat down, pen poised, but his notes no longer felt like ammunition. They felt like witness. The door chimed and in walked a frail woman leaning on a cane. Sarah rushed over. "Mom, you came." Her mother, pale but smiling, looked around the crowded restaurant. "I had to see it with my own eyes." Trump stood immediately, offering her a seat. "You raised a strong daughter," he said warmly. Her mother's eyes glistened. "She's the reason I keep fighting my illness. I want to see her succeed." Trump leaned in. "She will because you taught her resilience." Sarah's mother covered her face. "Overcome." The room grew misty-eyed. Even Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He scribbled, "Resilience," passed from one to the next. As the atmosphere grew tender, Daniel asked quietly, "Mr. President, do you ever feel invisible?" The question startled everyone. Trump leaned back, caught off guard. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then softly, "More than you'd think. People see the title, the power. They don't see the man underneath. But invisibility isn't always about being unseen. It's about being misunderstood." Daniel's chest tightened. It was the most candid response yet. The crowd listened, hushed. The President of the United States admitting to feeling invisible was not what anyone expected. And yet, it was what everyone related to. From the back, a small voice spoke. It was a little girl, no older than 7. She tugged her mother's sleeve, then asked aloud, "Mr. President, do you get scared?" The room chuckled softly, but the question pierced deeper than anyone anticipated. Trump knelt to her eye level. "Yes, every day. Scared of making mistakes, scared of letting people down. But you know what I do?" The girl shook her head. "I keep going anyway. Because courage isn't not being scared. It's doing what you must, even when you are." The little girl nodded solemnly as though she understood something far beyond her years. Daniel jotted, "Courage is walking with fear, not without it." Daniel felt his throat tighten. He was no longer just chronicling others' stories. He was wrestling with his own. He had grown up poor, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs. He remembered nights she cried quietly, thinking he didn't hear. He stood abruptly. "Sir, may I say something not as a reporter, but as Daniel, the son of a waitress?" The room turned to him. Trump gestured. "Go ahead." Daniel's voice shook. "I came here ready to expose you, but sitting here, I realize I've forgotten something. My mom worked in diners just like Sarah works here, and I spent years ashamed of that. Tonight, I'm not. Tonight, I'm proud." His voice broke. Tears filled his eyes. The crowd clapped gently. Trump walked over, hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Never be ashamed of hard work. It's the backbone of this country." Daniel sobbed quietly. For once, the reporter was the story. Something shifted after Daniel's confession. The walls between roles. President, reporter, cashier, customer crumbled. People shared openly. A single mother spoke of juggling bills. A retired teacher spoke of loneliness. A young man admitted he feared never being enough for his family. Trump listened intently, nodding, interjecting with short affirmations. "That's strength. That's resilience. That's America." Daniel sat among them, his notebook forgotten. The KFC buzzed, not with fryers or soda fountains, but with unity. For the first time in a long time, strangers felt like family. As the evening wound down, Sarah approached Trump timidly. "Mr. President, I don't have much, but I want to give you something." She handed him a small, crumpled note. Inside was a simple sentence. "Thank you for seeing us." Trump unfolded it carefully, staring at the words for a long time. His lips pressed tight, his eyes uncharacteristically wet. He placed the note in his pocket. "This means more than any speech I'll ever give." The room grew still. Daniel, for the first time, put his pen down completely. Secret Service agents reminded Trump it was time to leave. He stood shaking hands, hugging the elderly widow, patting Sarah's mother gently. The motorcade outside hummed, waiting. But before stepping out, Trump turned. "I came here for chicken. I leave here reminded of something far more important. America's heart beats strongest in its smallest places." The room erupted in applause. Not political, not partisan, but human. Daniel stood frozen, overwhelmed. When the doors closed behind him, the KFC felt oddly quiet. People looked at each other, unsure what to say. Then slowly conversations resumed, softer, warmer. Sarah hugged her mother. The construction worker shook hands with the mechanic. The little girl laughed, chasing a balloon someone gave her. Daniel sat in stunned silence. For once, he had no words. Back home, Daniel opened his laptop. He stared at the blank page for hours. Finally, he began typing not as a critic, but as a witness. He didn't write about politics, polls, or controversy. He wrote about Sarah, her mother, the mechanic's son, the child who asked about fear. He wrote about fried chicken becoming communion. And he ended with a single line. At KFC, a president wasn't just a leader. He was a man among people, reminding us that no one is invisible. Tears blurred his vision as he hit save. The article went viral, but that wasn't the twist. Months later, Daniel received a letter. It was handwritten with the presidential seal. Inside was the very napkin Trump had signed for Sarah. Returned to Daniel with a note. You asked me why here. The answer was never chicken. It was people like you who remind me what matters. Keep telling their stories. Daniel held the napkin, stunned. He realized the greatest twist wasn't Trump's words. It was how a night in a small-town KFC transformed him from a skeptic into a storyteller of hearts. And somewhere folded in Trump's coat pocket, remained Sarah's note. Thank you for seeing us. The KFC night lived on, not as a headline, but as a heartbeat.